Welcome to Surrender School.
Morning, everybody. Let's start with the mission of Surrender School. At Surrender School, we recover. Our mission is to share 12-step and other supportive recovery solutions with those who want a healthy relationship with food. We are not an official 12-step meeting, but we do try to adhere to the spirit of the traditions. And I think we've mentioned these things before, but these are still going on. We have the abstinence and recovery on Monday nights, 5:30 Pacific with Scarlett, and the reading room, which is hot in progress on Fridays with Eve and Kim on emotional sobriety from 8 to 9 Pacific. So check them out in Zoom room number 2. We do have on the intuitive eating, there's an intuitive eating page. So if you've missed a week, the recordings are all posted there, along with we've got the food journal link, some questions, some mantras. So if you haven't looked at it, be sure to check it out. I'm always kind of trying to keep things up there that are relevant to what we've talked about in the class. And then we have the Supercharge, working the steps by Enneagram type. I know they're taking a break tomorrow for the Labor Day holiday, but starting again back up next Sunday at 10:30 Pacific. I believe they're moving into step 9. And then this workshop meeting has its own WhatsApp group. So if you're interested in joining that, there's the QR code. I also send it out. I think it's in the chat as well as in the email that I send out as kind of a wrap up. So if you haven't been getting my emails, please let me know, but I'm pretty sure that I'm sending them. And if you want to get on the email list, just send me your email. I only send out the notes from the class and the worksheets, so I'm not sending anything else out. And I also keep it blind copy, so nobody's getting everybody's emails, just to keep it private. And then I also do post all the same content on the WhatsApp. So if you don't want to do email, you can get it on the WhatsApp. And everything here at Surrender School is free. We really want to make these programs accessible, but if you are able to donate or feel called to donate, we are a 501c3 and would appreciate any contributions. So let's go ahead and take a moment, feel your breath going in and out, feel your feet on the floor. We're really going to need this prayer today, or at least I really need this prayer today. There's a lot that may push up against some current beliefs. So let's really set aside everything we think we know for a new experience. God, help me to set aside everything I think I know to leave space for what I have yet to learn. All right. So we've made it through. This is week 5. Kathy and I were just talking about that. And we've done the honor your hunger, first principle we did, and then feel your fullness. Last week we did respect your body. And now today we're talking about make peace with food. And so let's dive in. We're going to do a quick check-in from last week. If anybody had any ahas from the different worksheets or throughout the week, if something hit you about respecting your body or any other principle that you may have that we've been working on, if there's anything you want to share, I'd love to hear it. Again, I sent out the I Feel Heavy worksheet. I also sent out a body reflection, just kind of looking to see, take your temperature or inventory about where you are with how much you respect your body, and areas to grow in. And or if you did a mantra that you want to either share or just comment about. Principle 3, make peace with food. Call a truce, stop the food fight, give yourself unconditional permission to eat. And it's one of those conundrums, and I was talking before we got started that I was a little nervous today about talking about this particular principle because it does bump up against a lot of what 12-step OA, different food recovery programs talk about, where they talk about abstinence and they talk about being addicted to food, and they talk about abstaining from certain foods and trigger foods and things like that. And this principle really is kind of questioning that, or asking you to think, to be curious about that, and to see if that type of thinking is causing more problems in terms of it's setting up deprivation, it's setting up that forbidden food kind of feeling, it's setting up that last supper type of eating. So buckle in. I'm not saying you have to change anything about what you're doing with your food right now. I'm also not saying, I'm also not green lighting like binging. Okay. I just wanted to say that because sometimes when we hear this principle, we're like, well, hello, like this is how I felt when I first heard it. Like, well, then I'm going to make peace with all this food that I haven't eaten in 20 years and I'm going to just enjoy the heck out of it. And that isn't the spirit of the principle either, right? Like we're building our foundation of like honoring our hunger, feeling our fullness. So if those things are shaky or not quite in place, then you may want to pause and not jump into this one. But if you feel pretty okay with those other principles, then this might be, a time to jump into making peace with certain foods. So I want to I'm going to keep talking, but there's a clip of a podcast that I would like to share because it's Evelyn, one of the co-founders of Intuitive Eating, talking to Dan Harris in the 10% Happier podcast. It was about 5 years ago. And you can really hear the way that he gets a little excited about the idea of introducing sugar back into his diet. And she's just able to really beautifully guide him in the way to do it, and not make it such an exciting thing. But I'll get to that in a little bit. So the big D word, right? Here we've got deprivation set up. And so when this happens, it's really can be hard to it can be really hard to make peace with food if you feel deprived. And it can be sort of a setup if you're feeling like you're restricting foods. One thing I will say is that if you do have medical conditions, so like if you have a celiac disease, I'm not suggesting that you suddenly start eating gluten because that would not be good for your body. So if there are certain foods that just do not work with your body, I'm not saying go try them. But if there are foods that I don't know, have such a charge around that it just doesn't, it's taking up a lot of space in your head, it just might be something to consider. And we'll walk through the steps. Again, everything can be baby stepped into. You don't have to be all or nothing in this one either. But they did a study where they took some scientists living in a biosphere in an airtight glass. And one thing that they were really noticing after being in there for 2 years, they felt very deprived of air and they missed the fresh air and they also missed food. And they emerged and they were so excited to be out. But they talked about just the different foods that they craved and how much time and energy and space um, the thoughts about food occupied for them. So again, it was like they took away not only air but food. I mean, they obviously fed them, but there were just so many. I'm sure it was a limited thing. So the idea of a biological and psychological deprivation can really, play make havoc on our thinking and also on our behaviors. So I think I'm going to move into the podcast so that you can kind of get a sense of what I'm wanting to say and feeling like I'm fumbling a little bit because I really don't want to step on toes, but I really also want to stay true to the intention of this principle. So I'm going to stop my share and get into a different screen here.
Let's get back to the thing you said before that perfectly described my mentality, which is, so let me just step back a second.
Yeah.
On sugar, I went through this long phase where I would just binge it to the point where I would feel awful. And when I say awful, I don't mean awful, just awful in the moment. I would feel awful the entire next day.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's how much I was eating.
Okay.
And I have an addictive personality.
Okay.
And so what I decided to do a couple of years ago was it was yet another day where I was texting back and forth with my wife saying, I feel awful today. And I just decided, you know what? I'm going to leave it alone. I'm having trouble with moderation, but I'm reasonably good at abstinence. So now for the last couple of years, I've gone through the world of with just a policy as, you can make me, as my friend Gretchen Rubin says, you can make me a birthday cake, but I'm not going to eat it.
Ah.
And it's been reasonably successful in that I haven't had a day where I felt awful because I ate so many Oreos the night before. But now sitting here with you, maybe I have to tweak that success story. And the reason why I bring all this up is you said before, a lot of people say to you, if you allow me to have that one Oreo, I'll never stop.
Yeah.
So that's my mentality.
Yeah.
So given everything I just said, how would you suggest I proceed?
I'm so glad you're asking. I get this question a lot. So first of all, I'd want to make sure that you're getting enough to eat, because the truth is, let's say you had just a crazy day on deadline, pulled into a meeting, you worked out, and you're finally getting home, you're having dinner at 8 o'clock, and let's say lunch was at 11. In other words, 9 hours without eating. If you decided to make peace with sugar right then and there, you're going to eat a meal's worth, and that's not going to feel good. So I'd want to make sure your body's nourished, and that when you have whatever it is that's sweet, that you have it at a time when you can pay 100% attention to it. Remember I asked you earlier, where does your mind go when you're eating? I want your mind to be I would love for your mind to be on the process of eating. Note what comes up even before you do it. Fears, excitement, and maybe judging the fact that you're excited. Oh my God, there's something wrong with me. I'm so excited. That's common, by the way, really common. And then even just noticing as you're unwrapping the candy, the sound of the candy, as you put, what I love, oh my God, I wish I had it here with you, but like a Junior Mints are my favorite ones to do a food experience with, because I would have you smell it. And when you smell Junior Mints, yes, you smell mint, you smell chocolate, you smell hints of vanilla, then you put it in your mouth and don't even take a bite and notice what happens to the taste and the texture. Then take one bite without chewing. That's hard to do. I always say, pretend I'm a kindergarten teacher. Don't go ahead of me. And then finally, when you feel comfortable, chew, notice the taste, notice the texture. And then after you finish swallowing, notice the remnant taste. So I actually do this in my office.
That's mindful eating right there, by the
It
way.
is. It actually is.
The first lesson in mindfulness-based stress reduction is the raisin.
The raisin. Yeah.
This one sounds much more fun.
It is much more fun. So I usually have people bring in their foods, and I tell you, this is why it's just such a joy to do this work, just to watch people's minds get blown. Like, oh my God, I had somebody who used to binge on candy corn, pounds and pounds every holiday when it would come around Thanksgiving and around Halloween. And she brought them in. We did this thing. She tasted things she'd never tasted before, because it was always urgent. Hurry, do this now before no one's looking. Hurry, let's do it fast. Don't taste it. And then feeling like what you were talking about, just feeling awful afterwards. And part of that awful is not only the physicality from the eating, but the emotional labeling. So it becomes enmeshed. This is what this equals now. So we have to separate it out, because all along as you're eating and when you finish, do I like how I feel? You don't have, you can stop anytime you want to.
Okay, so I suspect that what I'm about to say is, I suspect, speaking for many people in the audience, which is, wow, you are really forcing me to rethink my relationship with food.
Yeah.
And yet I'm still in this position of wondering, how am I going to do this? I still feel if I tonight at dinner with my wife and child for the first time in a couple of years say, okay, I'll have a little dessert.
Yeah.
How's that going to go? Even if I have a bag of food over there that I'll probably eat between interviews today. So I will be nourished by the time dinner rolls around.
Yeah.
And yet I have this fear that I will go crazy.
So, and that fear is really common. So number one, I'm glad you're challenging your thinking on this. I love that.
You're challenging my thing.
Yeah. I'm glad that you're revealing that. It's good. But I'd want you to do it at a time that you feel ready to do it.
I see. So like, for example, I've really noticed
Alrighty, I'm going to stop that there. Making peace with food, and food is such an easy thing, or it can be like a hot topic, but really it's about making peace with ourselves, and I think if I'm at peace with myself, my plate usually looks pretty, there's no like charge around it, so I would encourage or get curious about that idea of making food the bad guy, making food the thing I need to fix and control. And we talk a lot about that in the Eating in the Light of the Moon book, where it's like that eating disorder becomes the thing we can blame, or takes up all of our attention, and then we can ignore, we don't get underneath it to what's really going on. So that making peace with food, if that feels too hard, let's work on making peace with ourselves, So along with this idea of deprivation is that's kind of that seesaw syndrome where I eat something I shouldn't eat. Now I feel guilty. And then I'm never eating that again. That's off the table. I'm not, that food is bad. That food is not good or whatever it is. And then I feel deprived and I go to an event and it's there and then I eat 20 of them, right? That's just an example. But the idea is to get out of that deprivation, get out of that restriction, again, within the realm of your own body and what you need medically. We will move into that more when we get into the gentle nutrition principle. So, which is what I kind of hear people sharing, is that like idea of, really knowing what's good for our bodies, not just, for our physical bodies. So unconditional permission to eat is throwing out the perceived notion that certain foods are good and others are bad. And really, no one food has the power to make you healthy or not. Unconditional permission to eat means eating what you really want and eating without the obligatory penance. And I used to explain this principle as everything, there's no good foods, there's no bad foods. And it's more just, obviously different foods have different nutritional makeup. I'm not saying a piece of cake has the same nutritional value as an apple, but the idea is to come to terms with the cake or the apple, whatever I choose, it's okay, and so that's the idea behind making being more neutral with food and making all foods equal. I used to really struggle with that concept because obviously not all foods have the same nutritional makeup. So they did a study, there's anticipation of food restriction. So how many of us have like, you know what, come January 1st or the Tuesday after Labor Day, whatever it is, I'm starting that new food plan. I'm doing that detox. I'm going to eat keto. I'm going to do whatever, fill in the blank. They did a study where just the anticipation of food restriction triggered overeating. So there was this chocolate restriction imposed for 3 weeks. It triggered an increase in the consumption of chocolate before the restriction period as well as after. And they found that restrained eaters, so people who give up things or don't eat certain things, do not really end up eating less food overall. But it creates more of this guilt eating, the guilt feeling of when we do eat those foods. And then the forbidden fruit phenomenon, where they did a body of research on children, has shown that a parent who restricts his or her child's eating creates that rebound effect, causing the child to eat more of the forbidden food and also become disconnected with their bodies. They found this type of eating leads in the absence of hunger and overeating, and the child is more likely to grow up with an increased risk of emotional eating and a higher BMI, especially for women. So I think we can see this, especially with kids, the idea of don't touch that, don't touch that, don't touch that, or don't do that thing. And then they want to do that thing because it sounds so exciting and forbidden. And then there is no real connection of, wow, how does this food, let's just say food, feel in my body? Like, one was good, but 6 are too many, that idea. So habituation is really our friend, and habituation is really the name of the game when it comes to this principle. The idea that we repeatedly eat the same food that we find maybe exciting over and over until it's just not that exciting anymore. If you think back to if you're in a relationship or have been in relationships where that first time someone says, I love you, and just, all the chemicals light up and everybody, you just feel like, oh my God, they love me. And then after several years, they say they love you, and that's really nice and wonderful, but it's not that same zing and the chemicals are not lighting up in your body. And if you apply that to the idea of certain foods, where if it's a forbidden food or if it's that bad food that you've, labeled in your mind, it's always going to seem exciting. And she was even talking about that in the podcast, that it's normal to feel excited to eat a food you haven't had in a long time. That is a normal reaction. So the idea of habituation is really just, having it, experiencing it until you're kind of like, eh. And it's not the idea of, I think a long time ago there was, they may still do this now, but the idea of you go, if you're trying to quit smoking and you go into like somewhere and you smoke like 20 cigarettes in like 10 minutes just to kind of like overload your system and then you kind of get sick of it. It's not that idea to make yourself sick, but it's the idea of, well, I could have that frozen yogurt if I want it. And I'm going to choose to have it every day. And then it just, I don't know, it loses its luster. I don't know how else to say it. I remember when I first started this, years ago, it was really scary to have certain foods that I had, kind of had not had on my list, and to introduce them and to feel like, can I trust myself? And we'll talk about a few things in a second. But now there's really nothing super exciting anymore when it comes to food. And half the time I'm not really wanting those foods that were so, interesting and exciting to add in, years ago. So, but again, it has to be when I'm feeling, nourished, if I'm feeling stressed or emotionally off, it's not the time to like, oh, let's try a new food today. Like, it's definitely not the time to do it. Um, and the things that can inhibit habituation is distraction and stress. So we talked about that last week when eating without distraction. I believe that was last week. So really, being mindful of that as well. So here's some fears about eating forbidden food. And this is from the Intuitive Eating book. I won't be able to stop eating. That's a common fear. I've tried it before and it didn't work. I won't eat healthfully. I'm addicted to food. I don't trust myself. Others will criticize my choices. Or I'll do all this, but I need to lose weight first. And so clearly these are common because they're written down and more than one person has had them. And so I want to just talk a little bit about some counters to these fears. So the fears that I won't be able to stop eating. And this is very common. We heard it in the podcast as well. He was concerned like, well, how do I, one thing I found interesting about the podcast is I felt like he got really a little bit excited, like, oh, well, how do I do it? Well, when can I start? Well, how does it work? And which is normal, but it was just interesting to kind of hear that excitement about, can I go home tonight and do it? So the idea in getting over this, I won't be able to stop eating, is really incorporating that habituation. If a food feels like it's off limits, if it feels like, there's only, this, what is it like buy now or else it's going away. Like if it's that kind of like deprivation type of thing, then of course you're going to want to get in as much as you possibly can. So really embracing habituation can help with that out of control feeling around a certain food. I've tried it and it didn't work. I've tried it before and it didn't work. It could be that you did it, but we're kind of like pseudo letting yourself like, oh, I'm going to give myself permission, kind of maybe on a Wednesday, but not any other day. So again, it kind of sets up the brain is like, I don't know if I can trust this. I don't know if I can trust this. I think she's going to pull the rug out from me under me again. So it's really being committed to it. It's also being ready for it. This may not be for everybody, or not everybody is ready for this step. And that's okay. That's okay. And you may never, this principle just may be one that you're like, I'm never doing that one. That's okay. But there is a lot of freedom around it if you can, get support around it and kind of get underneath some of these fears. The idea that I won't eat healthfully, again, if a food is not forbidden, it kind of takes away the zing of it. It takes away the excitement of it. One food at one meal is not going to ruin your health, and we'll talk more about that when we get into the gentle nutrition. But I think for me, what I've found in the end, it all balances itself out. Because let's say I'm going to introduce a food and I eat more than my body needs in the moment, which may happen because it is exciting, it is new. and remember, if you remember back to the stages of intuitive eating, it isn't I learn it and then I do it perfectly. It's I learn it, I explore it, I'm just kind of, getting used to these new ideas. Um, Typically what I found is when I've eaten more than my body needs, the next day I'm not as hungry, So the idea that I'm going to ruin my health with one meal is just not really true. Um, and then the idea of being addicted to food, I'll let everybody kind of come to their own, have their own beliefs and feelings about this. But part of it is, that dieting and that restriction really can set up the overeating, can set up a heightened value of food, like that reward system of food can feel really, really high and heightened. So it's something to consider looking at if you are truly addicted to food, or if it's a pattern of deprivation that set up this overeating and then undereating, or whatever your pattern might be. I don't trust myself around food. And again, this goes back to that making peace with myself as well as my food. And also having our bodies start to trust us of like, oh, I think she means business this time. I think she's really, going to be nourishing us when we're hungry. She's going to give us food. What a concept, So again, it's building on those other principles that we've already talked about. Others will criticize my choices. And this could be a reality for people. And I think it's one of those things about, getting support around that, being in community around, changing your food habits and your food behavior, and working on yourself and setting some boundaries like, hey, I'm not really looking for input about what I'm eating or not eating or how much I'm eating. I just like to set that boundary, and trust me, that's easier said than done. I know, but maybe, asking for some boundaries around input, right? And then I need to lose weight first. So we're going to talk next week about rejecting diet culture. But if this is really what you're focused on, then, intuitive eating may not be your first stop, right? It might be working, or this principle in particular might not be the first one to start with. You might need to start with some other ones just to build up a little more of a foundation. So some baby steps, actually, I'm going to baby steps to consider. And again, this may not be the principle of the day for you to focus on. Maybe it's the hunger, maybe it's the fullness, or respecting your body. I think the coping with our emotions with kindness is going to be a really great one that's coming in a couple weeks. So some baby steps is to make a list of foods that you would like to make peace with, rate them from high, medium, and low in terms of your emotional kind of charge around them, and then start with those low foods in a supportive environment. So like she talked about in the podcast, making sure you're nourished, and not like leaving room necessarily for like a big dessert, let's say, but like having your dinner and then having, a couple bites of chocolate cake if that's a food, and that may not be a low food, but as an example, it's not saying like have a whole chocolate cake for dinner. Like that probably intuitively is not going to feel good in your body, and it could just reset up that idea that you're addicted to food, or that you can't control yourself around food, or that cake is bad, or whatever it is. So starting with those low foods in a supportive environment, not just making sure you've had enough to eat prior, but also like, is this a super stressful time? Maybe that's not the time to try this. So self-compassion is simply giving the same kindness to ourselves that we would give to others. And that quote was by Christopher Germer. And so I'm going to send out a couple of worksheets. This one is called Systematic Habituation, Making Peace with Food. So the idea again about the habituation is being very intentional. It's not like, oh, you know what? I remember her saying make peace with food. Today I'm just going to try, I don't know, ice cream, or I don't want to keep using sweets, but whatever that fill in the blank. It really needs to be you're preparing for this experience, you're intentional before, during, and after. This isn't me saying, giving you permission to just go have a binge. This is a very intentional thing. So choosing that specific food, are you going to have it at home or are you going to go out and have it? Sometimes having it out is a lot easier if you're not having that trust around that food with yourself. So ordering it out at a restaurant or getting it out and eating it out can sometimes be a nice like segue. What do you need to feel safe? So considering your self-care issues, your stress, again, maybe you didn't sleep very well the night before. Today, that day is not the day to try this. And then before, during, and after, really checking in with yourself around the emotions you're feeling. If you're feeling excited, that's totally normal. If you're feeling scared, that's normal too. So this is just a nice worksheet to work through. We can talk about it next week if anybody wants to try it. And then also that feeling if I can't stop eating, I'm always eating, looking again at the basic needs, sleep, work, life, relationship balance, stress, and are you eating enough food? And is there a hidden threat of deprivation? So are you eating like pretending you're going to do this, but really you're going to go back to doing the keto thing on Monday or whatever it is? And then any physical reasons that you need to pay attention to. So we did the poll, we checked in. So again, allow freedom without fear, giving yourself permission, not making foods good or bad, trying to see that neutrality or equality between an avocado and lettuce or peach pie and a peach, right? Watching for that hidden restriction. So really, if you're not ready for this, that's totally okay, but not putting yourself in a position where you're like, I'm ready, I have it, now I feel awful because I feel guilty and wrong. So again, just take your time with this. This is not a race. And if this isn't, the time, it's okay. Avoiding deprivation. So even if, you add that new food and then you like, well, I'm going to skip dinner or I'm going to have a lighter lunch, that's only going to start setting up the hunger for that rebound, eating to come in. And then make sure there's enough of that food so that it's not like you feel that deprivation or feel like, just that, I don't know, like I got to get it all in because this is the only one, it's the only day I'm going to do it, right? It's really changing that whole dynamic around how we eat, and what we tell ourselves about what we eat. So here are a few mantras to consider. Food is not my enemy. It is here to nourish and support me. All foods fit. I choose what feels satisfying and kind to my body. So again, if you have a medical condition, I'm not suggesting to eat any foods that don't align with that. Really being kind to our bodies. I release guilt and welcome freedom in my eating. Making peace with food is making peace with myself. Oh, I thought I made that up. Here it is, perfectly said. I trust my body's wisdom to guide me one meal at a time. And that's the thing too. Like say you want to make peace with food and introduce a food you haven't had in a long time. You can try it one time once a week. Like, right? It doesn't have to be every day, every meal. One time, once a week, right? And see how that goes, see how that feels. These are the books we've been using, the Intuitive Eating Workbook and the book, and then I'll have a link. I'll send out a link to that full podcast, and also she was also on We Can Do Hard Things with Glennon Doyle. I'll send out that podcast.
Thanks for recovering with us.